A Fist for Joe Louis and Me. Written by Trinka Noble, illustrated by Nicole Tadgell. Every Friday after I came home from working at the auto plant, my father gave me a boxing lesson. "Keep your fists up, Gordy," he'd say, holding up his big, strong hands like targets. Then, after dinner, we'd listen to the Friday night fights on the radio. Everyone did in Detroit, especially when Joe Louis was boxing. Detroit made two things: great boxers and cars. Millions of cars. But when the Great Depression came, people stopped buying cars. Times got hard in Detroit. We still had Joe Louis in our corner. By 1937, there was talk of war in Nazi Germany. That fall, my father lost his job, and his big, strong hands turned into tense, clenched fists. So my mother started sewing for Mr. Rubenstein, a tailor. The Rubensteins had fled from Nazi Germany so they would be safe. "It's not much money," she said, "but it will keep us in groceries." On Mondays, Mr. Rubenstein and his son Ira delivered pieces of sewing to my mother. "Gordy, you and Ira go out and play. Mr. Rubenstein and I need to go over this work." Ira was the new kid in my class. I'd never played with him, so I asked, "What do you want to play, Ira?" Ira looked down and shuffled his feet. "Boxing," he answered shyly. "Boxing?" I said with surprise. "What do you know about boxing?" Everyone in Detroit knew about boxing, but Ira hadn't been here long. "Not much, but I listened to the Friday night fights with my father. Our favorite boxer is Joseph Louis." Again, I was surprised. We listened too. At least we used to. After my father lost his job, he lost interest in boxing and the Friday night fights. "First of all, Ira, it's Joe Louis, not Joseph Louis. Detroit is Joe Louis's hometown. He got to start here. Detroit is Joe Louis, and Joe Louis is Detroit, okay? Now put up your dukes." "Dukes? What are dukes?" asked Ira. I almost said, "Oh, come on, everyone knows what dukes are," but I could tell by the serious look on Ira's face that he didn't know. "Your fists, Ira. Put up your fists." I was taller than Ira, and my hands were big, like my father's. When I put up my fist just to show Ira, he jumped back. Are you going to hit me?" "Gosh, no, Ira. I've never hit anyone in my life." From then on, when Mr. Rubenstein delivered sewing, Ira and I would pretend to box out in the back alley behind the garage. I showed Ira how to bob and weave and protect his face. Sometimes Ira got to be Joe Louis, and sometimes I did. Then Ira would have to be Max Schmeling, German, Joe's biggest opponent. We'd spar, bob, and weave, then throw fake punches and act out pretend knockouts. We'd make sounds like the cheering crowds. We never really hit each other. One day I said, "Ira, we need to make up some boxing names." Ira grinned. "Okay, I'll be Iron Ira, and you can be Gordy Steele." "Yeah," I laughed. "We're iron and steel, tough and strong, just like Detroit." Ira laughed too. Now it felt like Ira had always been a Detroit kid, like me. Then one day at school during recess, Nicky Bunkowski started picking on Ira, calling him skinny and puny. Nicky was older and bigger than both of us. At first, Ira ignored him, but Nicky wouldn't stop. He shoved Ira. Then it happened. Ira turned and put up his dukes. Nicky laughed, but Ira didn't back down. "No, Ira, don't!" I shouted. "He'll flatten you." Just then a teacher came out on the playground, so Nicky backed down. "Watch your back, you skinny little punk. We got unfinished business." I wondered then, has anyone ever yelled at Joe Louis like that? What would he do? That spring, Detroit was rainy and gloomy, which matched my father's face. When Mr. Rubenstein and Ira came, my father would disappear into the kitchen. It bothered him that he was still out of work and my mother was paying for more than groceries now. One day, Mr. Rubenstein followed him and started talking about boxing. "How about that Joseph Louis, huh? And this rematch with the German Max Schmeling? They're saying the German is superior and Louis can't win. They're calling it the fight of the century, but it feels like a fight between America and Nazi Germany, no?" My father looked surprised. "You know about this fight?" "Plenty I know," Mr. Rubenstein said. "My people and your people, we have much in common, Mr. Williams. This fight is for us, too." I didn't know what Mr. Rubenstein was talking about, but my father did. "It's for all of us," he said as he stood and reached out his big hand. Mr. Rubenstein reached out his hand, too. I wasn't sure why, but their handshake felt important, like reaching across something far greater than our kitchen table. After that, we never missed the Friday night fights on the radio. They were building up to the big rematch between Joe Louis and Max Schmeling for the World Heavyweight Championship. It was so important they were holding it in Yankee Stadium on June 22nd. I couldn't wait. But that day after school, Nicky Benkowski cornered Ira and me in the back alley. Immediately, Ira put up his dukes. I knew Joe Louis wouldn't let Ira go it alone. Sometimes you have to do the right thing, even if you don't want to. So I stepped in front of Ira and put up my dukes. Okay, Gordy, you want to go first? I can whip both of you, easy. Nicky was big and clumsy. He came at me like a bull and took a swing, but I bobbed. Nicky almost lost his balance. It seemed I could hear Joe Louis's voice in my ear. That's it, Gordy. Keep him off balance. Tire him out. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how, but I began to dance around Nicky, bobbing and weaving. Nicky whirled around trying to hit me, but I kept it up faster and faster. By now, Nicky was panting and throwing wild punches, his red face scowling at me. But Joe's voice was calm. Be patient, Gordy. Wait, then take your best shot. You only get one, so make it count. I didn't know if I had a best shot, but whatever I had, it would be for Ira and me. So I took a deep breath and threw a punch. I must have caught Nicky off balance, because he went sprawling, face down. Slowly, he got to his knees, spitting out dirt. Lucky punch, kid, he sputtered, then stumbled off. Ira held my fist up in the air. Gordy Steele, the winner! But I didn't feel like a winner. I felt sick inside, and for a moment, I wondered if Joe Louis ever did too. That night, Mr. Rubenstein and Ira came to our house. Gordy, look who's here, my father said. Please, come in. We've got the radio tuned into the big fight. Ira and I stretched out on the floor with a big bowl of popcorn. Over the radio, the ringside announcer was shouting above the roar of the crowd. Then clang went the bell, and Joe Louis is in the center of the ring, Max going around him. Louis with the old 1-2, first the left and then the right. We all jumped to our feet, spilling popcorn everywhere. Louis fights desperately to bring up a left to the jaw and a right to the body. Schmeling is down. 5, 6, 7, 8. The fight is over on a technical knockout. Max Schmeling is beaten in 1 round. We burst into tears. They don't call Joe the Brown Bomber for nothing, shouted my father. Later, Ira and I slipped outside to the back alley. The streetlight had just come on, so we shadow boxed against the garage wall. That night, we both got to be Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, the champ. When our fathers came outside, Mr. Rubenstein took Ira's hand. Time to go home, son, he said. My father reached for my hand, too. Then he shook Mr. Rubenstein's hand goodbye. And for a moment, the 4 of us stood there, hand in hand, quietly connected. That night, I felt as strong as Joe Louis. The fight of the century had lasted only 2 minutes and 4 seconds, but I knew it would be with Ira and me for the rest of our lives.